In golf, consistency is everything. And it's not just in your swing, but it's your mindset, your preparation, how you carry yourself through triumph and adversity.
You kind of have to think your way through it and, never get too high or low and never think things are too far off. Kind of plan out where I want to get to or what I want to feel and dive a little deeper in my brain and understand those things, I think is something that I've been good at and something that's very helpful.
My guest today on Chatter That Matters embodies all of that and more. Corey Connors from Listowel, Ontario. If you're a golf fan, you say that's a guy with a precision swing, determination. If you're Canadian, you'd say that's one of our top athletes. And I imagine if you happen to be a friend of Corey Connors, you'd say he's someone in my life that has authenticity and kindness and someone who deeply cares.
I can think of some times my dad, if I get a little frustrated on the golf course, just say, there's other things you can do. It's not very helpful to get frustrated. It's not very helpful to beat yourself up. I think those things are going to be great to pass on.
But this show is more than just how this kid from a small town now plays on a world stage.
Corey Connors' day indeed has arrived. He's a winner on the PGA Tour.
We'll learn about discipline, resilience, belief in your craft, the importance of values that ground you, and why chasing greatness is a game worth playing. One shot, one moment at a time. Hi, it's Tony Chapman. Thank you for listening to Chatter That Matters, presented by RBC. If you can, please subscribe to the podcast. And ratings and reviews, well, they're always welcome and they're always appreciated. Corey, how are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining me. A big fan and honored to have you on the podcast.
You got it.
A great story, the small town kid that makes big. Tell me a little bit about your background in Listowel, Ontario, because from what I understand, you weren't just a golfer. There was a nod that you could actually make the show in the NHL as well.
The NHL might have been a little optimistic, but was a really good hockey player, an avid hockey player growing up, and was the captain of our local high school team. Loved playing sports. Golf was a favorite and something that I excelled at from a young age, but, really proud of the town I grew up in. Got a lot of support from everyone in the town to help me get to where I am. And it's a special place to grow up.
Where I'm a little confused is every golfer I play with that came out with that sort of hockey has a horrible swing, but you have one of the best swings on the course. So how did you combine the two sports? Because to me, the mechanisms are completely different.
I think there's a few things that work well in both motions, but probably learned, the golf swing early enough that maybe the golf swing crept into my shot in hockey, which could have been a little bit better. I always shot it okay, but I think learning the proper fundamentals in the golf swing from a young age was definitely helpful. And, I don't think I had too much influence from my hockey.
Age 4, your first time on, your parents are avid golfers. Before we get into your parents, do you remember the first time you walked on a golf course, what it was like?
I think when I was 7 years old, it's kind of when I first remember going out there. I remember getting a nice set of clubs and I remember getting a bag tag, being officially a member at the Listowel Golf Club.
This RBC Community Junior Golf, which I love, the fact to go to these equity-deserving neighborhoods and get kids that probably never even thought of golf as something to do. And I always imagine what it's like for them to walk on because, it's not asphalt with basketball nets. It's not a soccer field. It's something, it's completely different than anything you've ever configured in terms of a sports field.
Yeah, I was fortunate to have access to a golf course and certainly remember loving the field of play, if you want to call it that. Just spending time outdoors. There was pretty much endless possibilities for me when I was a kid, walking onto the golf course. So definitely I was fortunate to be introduced to the game at a young age, but also fortunate to have a place that I could go.
I'm a real junkie of sports biographies and the people that actually make it to the top because we all know how tough that gauntlet is. And very often underpinning it is parents that care, sometimes parents that overparent. Just getting a sense of your parents, their involvement in what turned out to be obviously where you become one of the best in the world.
They were always really supportive of me and provided me with some opportunities. I don't think they ever pushed me. They just wanted me to be a kid. They wanted me to enjoy what I was doing. They certainly weren't pushing me to get out onto the golf course. I was the one, asking, if I could go play, practice, spend all day out there in the summer. I was able to kind of fall in love with it organically and, still certainly love it today.
When did you know as a young kid that you had talent? You weren't just, one of the good golfers at the club, but there might be something very special inside that swing and attitude.
I think it happened pretty early. The first tournament that my parents entered me in was a qualifier for the U.S. Kids World Championship. I think I was 9 years old, and I won the qualifier. I had never really compared myself against other kids my age up to that point. There wasn't a ton of other junior golfers in the local area. I was playing with my dad a lot and his friends as a youngster. At that point, I got to play in the U.S. Kids World Championship. I remember going to Jekyll Island, Georgia. Did reasonably well, gained probably some confidence from that and continued to work at it. Throughout the rest of my junior golf career, I never foresaw myself as being where I am today, to be honest. There was always other kids that were a little bit better, but I would say my consistency was always there. Didn't win a lot of events, but was always kind of knocking around and solid finishes.
And you go to Kent State, and a lot of times, you read about these athletes that just so consumed by sports, but you're studying actuarial math and you're two-time academic All-American. I mean, what do your parents talk about when they're bragging about you? Your golf or the fact that you actually went down? I mean, actuarial math, to me, I just smiled and I said, it's just so interesting that both sides of you seem to be roaring through that body.
I wouldn't say I loved school, but I was always, fascinated by certain subjects and pretty dedicated to those. I started in a science program, actually, biochemistry, and I'm a twin. My twin sister is a doctor, so she, took that route. But the lab time at Kent State, wasn't great. I did switch after a year or two into the actuarial math. Had some great classmates. The golfers, we miss a lot of school. I think the most school missed of any student athlete. Had supportive teachers and professors and other classmates when we would study together would kind of help bring me along. But I think for me, math, once you kind of understand a concept, you don't have to study it a whole lot. You can kind of problem solve and just the way my brain thinks through things, I guess. And I was able to pick it all up pretty quickly.
Have you found that sort of that gray matter that allows you to take a complex subject like math and break it down to a language that you can comprehend? Does that apply to sports?
Yeah, I really think so. I think I've always been a pretty, relaxed and patient person, and nothing stresses me out too much. And, when learning challenging subject matter, you kind of have to think your way through it. And that's kind of always where I'm at with my golf game too. Never get too high or low, and, never think things are too far off. I'm always kind of able to think through different, situations or kind of plan out where I want to get to or what I want to feel, and my fundamentals and mechanics of the swing. There's kind of a, reason behind everything, and being able to dive a little deeper in my brain and understand those things, I think is, something that I've been good at and something that's very helpful.
As you look at your competitors on the tour, I was watching an episode with Bryson DeChambeau, and he's talking about how he applies physics to his golf swing. Do you see that kind of on the tour? You people that are much more free thinking and much more disciplined? Is that kind of how it breaks out, or is there any kind of segmentation that you see even with the way people work out in the gym or they're on their practice sessions?
I think there's kind of people are on, sort of either end of the spectrum. Grew up, played college golf against Bryson and some amateur golf and in professional ranks as well. And I think he's at certainly one end of the spectrum where he's very scientific about his approach. I'd say it's not overly common. I think a lot more people are sort of feel based and feel oriented. And, despite the way my brain thinks, I still think, deep down, it's kind of a feel situation for me, and not overly scientific in my approach.
You first came on the map coming in second at the U.S. Amateurs. That must have been something quite special.
It's a pretty big stage, the biggest amateur golf event in the world. The year prior, I'd lost in the semifinal match, so it was really close to making it to that final match like I did in 2014. Something about those couple events, I think, really gave me confidence, having performed well. I remember matches in those 2 years beating the likes of Patrick Rogers, top player in the world, Bryson DeChambeau, John Rahm, Denny McCarthy in the semifinal match to make it to the final in 2014. All PGA Tour players, and my confidence sort of grew a little bit through my time at Kent State, started winning some events, and was an All-American, and ranked pretty highly in the amateur golf ranking. So
for people who don't follow golf, I mean, one of the tickets that you get for winning the U.S. Amateur coming in second is a chance to play in the Masters.
It's a pretty special perk, and a nice consolation prize for being the runner-up there.
Had you played Augusta before that, or?
So I got an invitation, or they send a letter to you in the late fall. It gives you some information if you want to go play the golf course. So might have been 2 or 3 days later, I hopped in the car with my dad. They allowed me to play just by myself with a club caddy, and my dad was able to walk around. So I did go and play the golf course a handful of times before the tournament. First time getting in there, was pretty special. And, was driving an old car at the time, and just imagining how many cars they turn away at the gate at Magnolia Lane. And, they see just another one coming to turn away, but it's a magical place. And, I've been fortunate to have qualified for many Masters now, and it definitely never gets old, but I'll always remember the first one. And being an amateur playing in the Masters, there's kind of some perks as well. I got to stay in the Crow's Nest, which is top floor of the clubhouse, kind of above the champions locker room, all the history. And
one of the most beautiful places I've ever been. And I had a chance to walk it. And I was amazed at the elevation you don't appreciate on TV.
It is crazy, the undulation there. And, one of the things that shocked me was how open the property was. Like from the clubhouse, first tee area is kind of the high point on the property, and you're looking down, you can actually see quite a few holes. But yeah, the 10th hole was shocking for me. I think you could put on a pair of skis there and ski down it, and much like the 18th right beside it.
And so your debut in the professional league was the RBC Heritage. Did you sign with RBC yet by the time you played that, or was that just all going to come together then? So
RBC was a partner of the national team program with Golf Canada that I was fortunate to be a part of, and had some connections. I wasn't an RBC ambassador at the time, but being a Canadian, I think, helped. And their connection to me through Golf Canada, playing in the Masters and making my pro debut at the RBC Heritage the following week was really special. Got a taste of the PGA Tour early. Didn't have much success, but was really hungry to sort of earn my way out there, and was able to do that pretty quickly.
Like, I would imagine getting on that PGA card, there's a lot of imposter syndrome at the beginning, because you're looking around and there's a lot of talent, and there's a lot of talent behind you that wants that card. I mean, it's got to be one of the greatest pressure sports. I mean, you're not signed for a 10-year contract with guaranteed income. You're kind of that eat what you kill mentality. I know it's changed a little bit, but what was it like the early days?
Getting a taste of it early, then earning my way there, I did have a sense of belonging and gained confidence through the ranks, knowing that I could, compete on the PGA Tour, having earned my card. And it's different. There's nothing guaranteed. You're playing for your livelihood, and was good at looking at sort of the big picture. It wasn't, each shot wasn't the most important shot in the world, and each day wasn't the most important round of my life. I was going to get lots of opportunities. I could just trust my game and trust the process of, doing what I do, and, felt like I could have the consistency that I've had, stay out on the PGA Tour for many years. And my game's continued to be refined, and, the consistency's still there, but definitely at a higher level.
2019, there's no guarantee just because you have your PGA card, I guess. So take me to the Valero Texas Open, because I understand you're only the 5th person in history to get in on a Monday qualifier and then walk out at the end with the trophy.
I had a PGA Tour card. My status, it's kind of all goes off of priority ranking. I was fairly low on the priority ranking list. I'd actually had quite a good season up to that point, but I couldn't sort of better my status by, doing that. I had already finished second and third in some events, played in the Players Championship, the flagship event on the tour, played in the Arnold Palmer Invitational, played in the Genesis Invitational. So I'd played my way into some of the bigger events, but the Valero Texas Open, just being a sort of called a standard PGA Tour event, there was a lot of guys ahead of me trying to get in the field there. And there wasn't the only other way to qualify for it was to go to the Monday qualifier, which, there's 80 players playing for 4 spots. And I was able to get one of those spots. And I think because I had success on the tour up to that point, playing in the Monday qualifier, there wasn't a lot of pressure. It wasn't do or die. Whenever you qualify, you have to have a pretty special round. And I just tried to keep that mindset through the tournament and knew I was playing well. The rest, I guess, is history.
How do you hold it together on that 4th day when you know that you've got a shot at the victory, your first one? Your first one's got to be one of the hardest one.
Yeah, it's definitely a big hurdle to get over. You don't know if you kind of have it in you. It's hard to win. I had a really up and down day that day. I made 10 birdies throughout the day. I started with 4 birdies in the first 5 holes, then made 4 bogeys in a row on 6 through 9, back to even par, and added 6 more birdies on the back 9. Was able to birdie the 71st hole, the 17th there on Sunday, and give myself a 3-shot lead going into the last. It's not over until the ball goes into the hole, but it was nice to have a little bit of a cushion there, and tried to take it slow, one step at a time, and was definitely a special feeling.
I'm always curious as a fan, what it's like on the 18th hole when you've got a 2 or 3 stroke lead. Are you relaxed, or is even more tension within you? Because if you chili dip it or slice it into the woods or something, or is it just, you just as a professional athlete, you go, this is just a shot?
I think there's a bit of both sides. It's just a shot, and I'm pretty good at that. But there's definitely, some thoughts there on thinking of how it's possible to screw things up. Just try and execute the golf shots. Keep your mind present. And I was able to do that.
What role does the caddy play in all of this? Because it is one of the most interesting sports in the sense that you have a friend, a fan, somebody that's not afraid to dress you down if they think they're going the wrong way. I mean, that whole relationship to me is a really unique dynamic in golf.
Yeah, it sure is. And I think it's an important role. You have to, I've had a couple different caddies through my career, and both, been great guys to be around, easy guys to get along with. They're really professionals. They have to work hard. I rely on, my caddy for a lot of details and, a lot of advice out there throughout each round. And even more important, when you're in contention or you're trying to win, you got to be making the right decisions, and, having someone you can communicate with and a relaxing presence around you is really, really helpful.
So this team of Canadian golfers that wear both the Maple Leaf and the RBC shield is quite something. And in your case, that took you twice to the Olympics and then also being a member of the President's Cup. What's it like to play for Canada? It's
really special. Growing up as a junior golfer, getting to play on the national team and some international events and through my amateur career was really amazing. It's, proud Canadian, and it's pretty awesome to put on the Canadian flag and carry the Canadian bag, represent, a great country. Really lucky and fortunate to have qualified for the Olympics a few times, to represent Canada on the International President's Cup team twice now. Grew up watching the Olympics, winter and summer. And it wasn't really something, golf wasn't a part of the Olympics. So it wasn't something that I ever thought was, going to be possible. But once it got added into the Olympic Games in 2016, it was a big goal of mine. I thought it would be really cool, and going to be definitely working hard over the coming years to qualify for the Olympics again in 2028. I often equate professional sports almost to that, when you leave elementary school, you go to mid school and then high school. It's almost like you go in as the rookie. When do you become the veteran? When do people start looking to you and saying, Corey, we need not just your capabilities on the course, but also that leadership? I think it just kind of happens because of who you are. I'm a fairly quiet person, but I do recognize certain situations, where I do have some experience and can share that. I've had close friend Taylor Pendrith get on the PGA Tour over the last couple of years, and tried to give him some advice. He played in his first Masters this past April, and played some practice rounds with him, and tried to share some of the things that I had learned, some of the things that I had felt, and be a leader in some respects. But it's an individual sport for the most part, and apart from these team events, the team events I've been a part of on the President's Cup, I think there are some leadership guys. The captains are all successful players. They've been successful on the international teams, and successful in their golf careers. And think of a guy like Adam Scott, who's played on so many international President's Cup teams, and he's a guy who's definitely taken a leadership role and more vocal than a lot of other guys, and really helpful. And I'm really lucky that he's part of the team. We come back, Corey Connor and I talk about what's next, my 3 takeaways. And then Mark Soder joins the show to talk about why golf matters. Hi, it's Tony Chapman. RBC has been a long-standing supporter of golf in both Canada and the United States through their title sponsorship of the PGA Tour's RBC Canadian Open and RBC's Heritage Tournament, as well as key partnerships with the Heritage Classic Foundation, Golf Canada, and the PGA of Canada. Combined, RBC golf tournaments have raised over $35 million to help communities thrive.
But did you know about RBC Community Junior Golf? This is an initiative led by RBC in partnership with Golf Canada that's building greater diversity and equity in golf by providing affordable access for youth from equity-deserving communities across Canada. To date, RBC Community Junior Golf has engaged more than 20,000 youth participants by providing first tee programming at no cost and subsidizing green fees through Youth on Course. Who knows? One of those kids might be the next Nick Taylor.
For the Eagle, for the win, to the top, take it! Yes! 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 The drought is over! The drought is over! Nick Taylor with the Eagle, the 2023 RBC Canadian Open champion! He's an icon now in this country!
Supporting Canadian youth? Well, that matters to you, to me, and to RBC.
I knew I was going to give myself many more chances. I've had a lot of good finishes and learned a lot over the last few years and have a lot of confidence in my game. It's just a matter of time. Just keep pecking away, and wasn't expecting it to happen this week, but...
Corey Conners' day indeed has arrived. He's a winner on the PGA Tour.
Joining me is Corey Conners. If you're a golf fan, you'll know him for his precision golf striking ability, his consistent performance. If you're Canadian, you'll know him as one of our top athletes. And if you're fortunate enough to have him as a friend, chances are you'll say he's one of the most real, authentic, hardworking, and wonderful people you've ever met. The narrative that's certainly presented to the golf fan is that everybody's competitive on the course, but off the course, there seems to be a lot of camaraderie. Is that fairly consistent, that more often than not, everybody supports everybody until it's time to tee off?
A lot of guys on the PGA Tour have a good relationship and, are friendly. That can maybe change when you're in the heat of competition, but the culture on the PGA Tour is excellent, and the culture in pro golf is great, where guys are supportive of one another.
What advice can you give to the people listening about when things don't go your way? I liked what you said earlier that, I try to manage the highs and lows, because obviously when it doesn't go your way, you've got cameras on you, you've got fans watching you. I mean, you're in the public domain, but how do you frame it, and how can we learn from that?
For golfers, we're used to losing. We lose more than probably any other athlete, because it's very difficult to win. I guess apart from maybe Scotty Scheffler, who seems to win quite often, but there's certainly a lot of disappointments. But you can also find positives in those. You can learn lessons. You've always been pretty good at, whether it's a great week or a really bad week or an average week of kind of making some notes and, assessing things. There's always some things I can find that I did well. There's always some things I can find that I would like to do better. If there's a lot of things I'd like to do better, I need to make a plan and, be excited about trying to do those better next time and be proud of trying to improve on those. I think that can be used in life and for, many different professions where, there's always going to be some setbacks and some disappointments. Try and learn from them and then really enjoy the successes that will come if you keep working hard.
Becoming a father with two children, has that changed anything in terms of your priorities, your approach to the game, your approach to life?
I feel like everything I do is for my kids now. I feel really lucky to be a dad to two great young kids, and I've got a great wife who's always been really supportive. We've known each other for a very long time, and she's been kind of through it all with me. She's a lot more emotional through the highs and lows, so maybe she could learn some of those lessons. But being a dad's amazing. It allows me to separate golf and life and do whatever I need to do for the kids off the golf course. And when I'm playing, certainly playing for them.
What lessons did you learn from your mom or your dad that you're hoping to bring to your kids?
Being really supportive of whatever I wanted to do. That was something that I really appreciate now from my parents. Gave me opportunity to do what I wanted, provided some direction and guidance there. Always just making sure that I was happy. Gave me freedom when I needed it. They reined me in when I didn't. I can think of some times my dad, if I'd get a little frustrated on the golf course, he would just say, there's other things you can do. It's not very helpful to get frustrated. It's not very helpful to beat yourself up. I think those things are going to be great to pass on and, have a positive outlook and try and have fun with everything that you do.
And who do you look up to on the tour in terms of being that ambassador to the game? Not so much just their talent, but you just go, that individual embodies what I believe the game of golf is all about.
Someone that I've always had a lot of admiration for is Rory McIlroy. He's pretty outspoken, trying to help grow the game of golf when he doesn't have to be. He's obviously an incredible talent, but I think he's been a great ambassador for the game. And he kind of puts himself out there, is very helpful to the game and something that I admire.
The PGA Tour, obviously it went through a big stress test over the last couple of years with LIV, and yet now the commentators are kind of saying, these championships are really showing the difference between the PGA players that play every day in the most competitive situations and those that don't. How do you think this will all resolve? Or do you have any idea how this will resolve so that it's good for the game, good for the fans, and good for the players?
I will say that I think the PGA Tour is in a great place, continuing to grow, continuing to get better. And, the tournaments we play week in and week out are, against a lot of the best players in the world. Certainly, miss competing against some of the guys, some of the players on the LIV Tour. I think some of those guys would help grow golf on the PGA Tour, but they've been doing a great job finding a way to grow. I think the product is as entertaining as ever and competitive as ever.
The lessons in life that you can get from the golf course, and I go back to RBC Community Junior Golf, sort of trying to make golf more inclusive, because a lot of parents might not think of golf as a natural sport. It's kind of that almost white privilege sport, but RBC is trying to counter that. What lessons in life can we get off the golf course that we can apply to everyday life? It's
awesome to see, RBC, they do so much for golf and then, investing in the grassroots and getting more kids into the game. But there's so many lessons that you can learn, whether it be organization, discipline, work ethic. The First Tee program coming to Canada as well. They've got a number of pillars of lessons that are, great for every kid to learn in golf and in life. I'm hoping as I continue to grow in my career, I can, be a part of some of the giving back as well and try and get more kids introduced to the game. My wife and I are trying to do that in our community a little bit already. And it's definitely exciting to see young kids have fun with golf.
RBC Canadian Open coming up. It must be one of the most exciting tournaments for you to play because you're certainly a fan favorite.
It's always so much fun coming back and playing the RBC Canadian Open in front of the Canadian fans. Canadian fans are the best. They're really well traveled. Seem to have Canadian supporters everywhere that I play, but none more than the home event, the fifth major, if you call it on my schedule. Grew up watching that, attending it, being able to just see it up there and, being one of the top Canadian golfers and someone that everybody out there is rooting for is a special feeling. And I've done a good job or a better job, I think, the last few years, sort of feeding off the crowd, their energy. They all want me to do well and can kind of use cheers to my advantage and hopefully get myself in the mix.
I always end my podcast with my 3 takeaways. And the first one is really how you embody the narrative of how Canadians want to be thought of. In a time where we're very divided as a country, what knits us together is when we see our athletes and our celebrities acting with such integrity and grace. We could take that back into our own lives instead of always being for and against. So I appreciate your attitude and approach. I love the sense of highs and lows because especially today's world, we are on a roller coaster. And I think finding a midpoint at times is some of the best advice because you can't predict either how high or how low it's going to happen, but at least finding some footing. And as you said, even at the end of a game, to look at what you did well and what you did bad, but both of them matter. And then just the third thing that we just talked about when you talked about the sense that there's so much to learn, and maybe that we sometimes just get so caught up in the excitement of sport and the leaderboard. But when you step back and realize that all began with a 4-year-old who became a 9-year-old who won his first tournament and then went on to study for some crazy thing, actuarial math, to be an All-American, and now where you are. It's a hero's journey, and I'm really looking forward to the Canadian Open, and I've got you in my pool, so don't screw up.
Yeah, no pressure. Thanks very much. Yeah, I think those are all amazing takeaways. And just a normal guy who grew up in a small town in southwestern Ontario, and I worked hard and tried to chase my dreams, and fortunate to be living it.
We're living it with you, so I appreciate you joining me in Chat That Matters, Corey.
Yeah, thanks, Tony.
So welcoming back to the show, Mark Soder. He's the Director of Brand Marketing at RBC, focusing primarily on the golf program. And we were talking before we turned on the camera, And your friends are questioning why you don't play better golf, and you had to let them know that it's actually a full-time job. This isn't just an opportunity to take the sticks out in the course.
Yeah, you're right. I do wish I got out a little bit more, but get to be at beautiful golf courses through the work lens. We're not actually swinging as much as I'd like to.
Golf is such an important part of your platform at RBC. And I guess the first question a lot of listeners would have is why golf and not hockey or one of the other sort of sports that are attention grabbing?
We have been invested into golf for nearly 2 decades. Our primary objective is actually U.S. awareness. We're not a retail bank in the United States. And when you look at who our core consumer, our core audience is in the United States, and the ecosystem that we could build within golf from media objectives, from awareness building objectives, from client hosting objectives, golf really bubbled up as an attractive sport, an attractive platform to invest and grow and do what we needed to do.
And as you talk about that ecosystem, I mean, one move on the chessboard, I should say, on the golf course that you made was the sense of actually sponsoring events. RBC Canadian Open, I get, but you're also involved in the heritage as well. What's the rationale behind putting your name on a tournament? For people listening, how do you measure success?
We measure the RBC logo on all of our ambassadors' patches on their sleeve. Our logo is all over the tournament, from pin flags to tee backs to encores to the hospitality tents. And we, along with our agency partners, measure to the second what type of TV exposure, duration, clarity, etc. And through the system, the algorithm, we can compute what the return on that is. And another big component, and we talk about that ecosystem and what it does not only from a media and the media volume that we get through the contracts of the 30-second spots, but also who we are hosting on site and just that client, and through the whole week of programming, what that means to our business and our advisors and executives on site.
You know, Corey Connors is on the show, as you know, and he wears the RBC shield proudly. I should tell you that he speaks so highly of this partnership. He really does feel it's a partnership versus a sponsorship. Talk to me a little bit about that strategy as well, because I've invested in these tournaments, but I'm also have this sort of team RBC. How do you choose the kind of talent that you're after? And what's the relationship besides the exchange of a shield and money that you deem to be time and money well spent?
This year, we have 11 ambassadors across both the LPGA and the PGA. They are a part of the family, ensuring that their core values align with RBC's core values is a big component of what we do. And Corey Connors has been an amazing addition to the team, speaks so highly of the partnership. We're aligned with his values. He is a wonderful player and an incredible ambassador, and does some incredible moments with our executives and guests that makes our platform so special from a hosting and hospitality perspective.
One part of your platform that many aren't aware of, but I am so proud of, is RBC Community Junior Golf. It's saying to the people that are involved with it, golf is for everybody, not just being a somebody.
This is an area of our platform that we're really proud of. The objective of this platform was to put clubs in hands of kids for the first time, underrepresented communities, and kids that would maybe otherwise never get the chance to play golf. And we know inherently the values, the life lessons, those moments in time with your parents and your family growing up on a golf course, what those life lessons can bring you. So what we learned going through even COVID was 48% of new entrants to golf were from the BIPOC community. We've engaged, together with our partnership with First Tee and Youth on Course, we've engaged over 50,000 youth from coast to coast and introduced them to the game, and hopefully a game that they fall in love with and stick with for a lifetime. So,
Mark, last year I talked to a lot of people, and I'm always fascinated by stats, but one that stood out was when I talked to you and you let me know that golf wasn't just for a handful. In fact, the momentum behind golf in Canada, it's one of the fastest growing sports. Are we still seeing that?
There's a lot of growing momentum behind the game, which is exciting. And as an industry, this sport matters to Canadians. There's over 2,000 golf courses in Canada. Golf as an industry employs over 300,000 Canadians. And when we talk about charity, when we talk about not just in golf, when we talk about charity across the board, there's over $300 million raised in Canada for various great objectives and causes. And golf is the vehicle that helps bring those stories and those dollars to fruition. So golf in Canada matters.
You know, Mark, it's interesting how this all started a couple of decades ago to build some awareness in the United States, and has become such beautiful momentum for society and for the RBC brand. So it's let's tee it off. We got the Canadian Open coming up. We'd love to see another Canadian sink another 92-foot putt to win it. You can't buy that kind of excitement. Good things come to good brands and good people. So thank you for joining me.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Tony.
Once again, a special thanks to RBC for supporting Chatter That Matters. It's Tony Chapman. Thanks for listening, and let's chat soon.